In December 2019, China notified the World Health Organization of several cases of human respiratory illness.
What's up, guys? Dan Collins here, back for another episode. This is episode 6, The Chaos Continues. I'm coming to you here from Belgrade, Serbia. Been on a little summer tour, a few areas in the Central Europe. Started off in Oslo, Norway. Week in Budapest, and then I've been down here a couple weeks in Belgrade. Some interesting things. I keep hearing good things about Romania here. Central Europe sending a lot of workers to Romania, so go figures. I'll have to go check that place out here at some point. Down here in Belgrade, beautiful place. I'd call it a cafe culture city. Everybody enjoys hanging out at the cafes, smoking and drinking coffee for hours and hours with their friends. I've seen a lot of economic development. I'm hearing the same thing the last 3-4 years. Serbia is really kind of trying to be a Switzerland in all this global confrontation. The Chinese have a lot of investments here. Saw a lot of new Chinese plants. They have great Russian gas prices down here. They have not sanctioned Russia. Berlin's not happy about that. But we'll see how Serbia makes out. They're, still recovering from the 90s, really, and I don't think anytime soon are going to be in the EU. They're kind of going to keep their own path. So we'll see how it goes. But what we're going to talk about today is the continuing meltdown in Europe. So we've had other things happen in the global geopolitics here. Shinzo Abe, Japan, the prime minister was assassinated. Terrible event. I don't think that's going to affect anything really in Japan. You saw Sri Lanka. The president of Sri Lanka had to sail away on a Navy ship and get out of there. He's in Singapore now. What's coming out of there is that they tried to do some new ESG organic fertilizer, and the crops didn't come in. There's no food. There's no fuel. And when that happens, people hit the streets. And Sri Lanka is today. Pakistan will be tomorrow. Watch that space. But today's show, as I mentioned, I want to focus a little bit mostly on Germany, the European Union, and the gas crisis. So it's 14th of July here, 2022. The war continues. Russia continues to grind on. We are seeing some renewed Ukrainian capability in hitting Russian targets with some of the new U.S. equipment that's come in. But in terms of the overall path of the war, it continues. Russia just keeps taking new cities every week. So haven't seen a change there yet, and questionable if we will. But what's really happened, where we've seen, is the Nord Stream 1 pipeline is gone offline this week for maintenance. Natural gas prices are up 700%. Electricity prices in Europe are up over 40% year over year. They're going to go higher. The euro is now at 1-to-1 parity with the dollar. Hasn't happened in 20 years. My predictions on the euro, you're going to see a euro is going to be worth about 0.8 to the dollar at least, which means we've got about another 20% to go in the euro. Why is that going to happen? The Europeans now cannot build up the gas reserves. Nord Stream 1's down for maintenance. Nord Stream 2, they cut off. They're not going to start it. They were only relying on what could come out of the old Soviet-built Ukrainian gas network. They're not getting hardly any gas right now. They're pulling from storage. They're not able to build up reserves for the winter. They're going to drown their reserves, use it all up. Winter's going to get here, and they're going to be in big trouble. Germany's already telling its citizens it's rationing hot water. It's telling everybody when you take a shower, just shower in the most important areas. Really ridiculous stuff. And all this was predictable. You knew it was going to happen. I've mentioned in some of my other videos, you don't beat Putin by shutting down an $18 trillion European economy, which is what they've done. You cannot change over a gas network that's been built up for 50 years. You can't change it in a few months, okay? The Russian 5 million barrels of oil every day and the natural gas that they export, even if that existed in the U.S. and Qatar and Saudi, there's no ships to get it to Europe. Germany's building the terminals now. It's not going to be till 2026. That they've got 20 new terminals online, and even that would only get them about half of the problem fixed. So Germany's turning on coal. The Green Party is turning back on coal, but they're not going to buy Russian coal. So you're going to see electricity prices skyrocket. I believe you watch October, November, December, we're going to see massive social unrest in Europe. Germany, Italy, France, all across the European Union. You can expect that. Expect the euro to hit new lows by midwinter, maybe before. You're going to see unprecedented turmoil and chaos in Europe. And I'm here now in Europe. I think, the Serbians, East Europeans, they have good Russian gas contracts in place. I don't think they're too worried. But who's really worried is the, Germany Inc. When you talk about natural gas, it runs every plant, every facility in Germany, okay? Chemicals, BASF, German chemical giant, is warning we're going to shut down. A lot of these plants, you just turn off the electricity, you could also destroy equipment. So not only are they going to just stop Germany Inc., they're just, everything's just going to shut down, and who knows what's going to be able to restart and what won't be able to restart. But chemicals, glass, steel, aluminum, you name it, heavy electrical inputs. So Germany Inc. lives off cheap Russian gas, which they no longer have. So what we're seeing now is Europe is basically committing suicide here. You're taking the manufacturing side of Europe and the agricultural and mineral and oil and gas supplier, and you've just separated them now permanently. These two economies may not recover. We've seen what's happened to the euro. It's down 14%. What we want to focus on is Italy. Watch the Italian space. The ECB today, as we speak, still has a negative interest rate. Minus 5%. 0.5% is the benchmark ECB rate right now in the face of a 10% inflation. So the European leadership's driving this continent off a cliff. Italian bonds now are at 4%. That's the highest they've been since 2014. Watch that space. If you see Italy go up to 6%, 8%, 10%, all of a sudden they're insolvent and the Italian government is bankrupt, and Germany's not going to be able to backstop them. Their factories aren't even working. They don't have, people can't even get heat. So Europe, the ECB has been printing money since the 2008 global financial crisis, and they've been muddling along, and apparently over a decade of money printing has still not been able to bail out these banks. So we're going to see really the fireworks happen here coming up globally, but especially focused on Europe. We don't know what's going to happen. We got to expect a Lehman event of some kind to happen somewhere, and where that comes from, we really don't know. Back in 2008, very few people saw the housing crash coming. But something's gonna trigger. It's gonna be the derivatives. It's gonna be housing. It's gonna be inflation. And this inflation rate at 10%, the U.S. came in at 9% this week. Producer price inflation over 11%. This is the kind of inflation that will take out the boomers. Okay, 5 years at 10% inflation is like 65, 70% compounded. That means your account's down 70%. In terms of purchasing power. So we're at the end gate here, the end games here, where the boomers get taken out. Anyone on a fixed income gets taken out. The millennials have suffered for a decade with the financial crisis, the whole gig economy, massive student debts, and they're going to be the ones, if you're young out there, keep heart that you still got the muscles. You're going to be able to rebuild your lives. The boomers are not. They're going to be retired, and their fixed income checks aren't going to buy anything. That's where we're headed. So when these crises cascade, You just don't raise the interest rate a few points and everything go back to normal. It doesn't work that way. It usually gets worse and worse. There's $300 trillion of global debt out there that can only get written off. It's never going to get paid back. Okay, the era of money printing is over. February 24th, when the U.S. seized another country's sovereign wealth reserves, it ended it. Something broke in the system. So normally the U.S. would print all that money, send it out into the world. The last 10 years, European Union's been printing the money, send it out in the world. The so-called golden billion, the United States and Europe, and the rest of the world works for them, takes the tickets and sends real goods. That's over. That something broke. The inflation is already too high, and controlling it is going to be very, very difficult. So something broke in the system. And this goes back to what we talked about before. This is the simulation economies versus the real economies. You know, the U.S. lives in a simulation economy. It's the greatest economy ever, yet we make half the number of cars we did back in 2016. We made 18 million cars. This year we'll make 13. This is the greatest economy ever. Parcel shipments, you know, China ships 4 times the amount of parcels annually that the United States does, yet we claim we have a bigger economy. You know, so this is a simulation economy. Everything is a fake. Everything's a charade. Don't ever trust a government statistic. I mean, they're unusable at this point. So look at real production numbers. Don't count on statistics. Real numbers, what's made. Look at real oil usage, real steel production, real electricity consumption. These will show who's got real economies and who doesn't have real economies. As I mentioned, Nord Stream 1 is down. We'll see within the next 10 or 14 days if the Russians even restart it. I think they're no doubt using oil as a weapon. They're using grain as a weapon. And they're going to try to force Europe's hand by the middle of winter to come to the peace table. Right now, the Americans don't want peace. They want to try to bleed Putin for everything they can get out of him. The grand game continues. These Washington, D.C. creatures have never once looked at diplomacy as an option in this whole Russian-Ukrainian crisis, and it's costing lives. I think I mentioned on a video, Ukraine has lost more than 50,000 soldiers. Russia's probably over 10,000 now. Those numbers look to double, you know, in the next month to 2 months. So J.P. Morgan has come out this week, has also said expect $380 oil. Now, I will say there is something very interesting going on in the markets. Oil's crashing, copper's crashing. Oil's crashing in the middle of the summer driving season, just as China comes off lockdown. One would ask the question, is the West playing games in the financial markets to drive inflation down, to drive commodities down? I would expect with all their past behavior, that's probably what's going on. This could create even bigger problems. The Saudis have come out this week and said, we're not going to sell you $100 oil. That's our floor price now. So just expect massive volatile swings in the markets, especially for commodities. Long term, I like commodities, but keep in mind there is one big caveat on commodities, is that 20 years ago, China created the super cycle in commodities. Commodities had been a dead game for a long time. Then China went and built 100 New York cities. They used more concrete in 3 years than the United States used in 100. Okay, that's all built out now, though. We had new data come out that China leaked population data out of China that China may be missing 200 million people. And I put something on Twitter about that, and I think it's very possible. All the people, hundreds of people I've known in China over 20 years living there, I don't know, rare to find someone with 2 kids. Like maybe a few times I met somebody with 2 kids. Everyone else 1 kid, but a lot of people I know never had kids. And there's especially this younger generation, there's a lot of people waiting into their mid-30s, late 30s, and they're never having kids, they're never settling down. So I believe, and I put on Twitter, I think the real replacement rate in China is 0.73, way below the 2.3 number you need just to replace the population. Now, all of this may not be a bad thing. I mean, the stretch on China's resources at 1.4 billion was immense. Perhaps, a controlled adjustment down to 800,000, not such a terrible thing. but it has to be done in a controlled manner, and it's really not being, because the population drop is so draconian. So there are some people that are saying China's actually 1.2 billion people, not 1.4 billion people, which would already make them the second most populous country to India. And India itself is not at replacement level. Mexico is not at replacement level. Many of the Islamic countries like Iran are under, at around 1.1 on the replacement level, instead of 2.73, which is needed to replace the population. So this whole global depopulation debate is quite interesting. I think it'll continue. But watch this space on the financial manipulation. As I said, oil is going to have wild swings. If we see the Saudis pull back and not sell under 100, you could get massive $10, $20 spikes in oil a day. This whole global system, the global bond market's still over, 120 trillion. Negative yielding bonds are still out there. As I mentioned, the ECB still has negative rates in the face of 10% inflation. So this whole global economy, the global geopolitics, is an absolute race car in the red right now. So, I'll stay tuned. I follow it close. Put your comments on. Please subscribe. Follow the channel. Let me know what you guys think. Any topics you want to discuss. But I'm in Belgrade now. I'll be back in the U.S. next week. We'll probably follow up with another 1 or 2 videos next week. So until then, stay tuned and have a good week. Take care, y'all. Bye-bye.